The Man in the Hoodie. It was a chilly Friday afternoon in Seattle, Washington, the kind of day when the city buzzed with life, but the overcast skies made it feel as if the world had taken on a gray filter. Inside the downtown branch of Emerald Horizon Bank, the atmosphere was no less charged. The lobby, filled with the faint hum of printers and muted conversations, had an air of formality that felt almost stifling. Matthew Ellis, a 42-year-old entrepreneur and philanthropist, stepped inside the bank. He was casually dressed in jeans and a faded blue hoodie, his attire contrasting sharply with the polished look of the bank's clientele. Matthew was no stranger to this branch. He had often visited it over the years. However, today's trip was supposed to be simple: retrieve an envelope containing vital documents he'd left for safekeeping. As he entered, he smiled and nodded at the security guard by the door, a towering figure who gave him a perfunctory glance before returning to his post. Matthew walked up to the counter, where a young teller was busy typing into her computer. She glanced up and greeted him with a polite but distant smile. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" she asked. Matthew returned her smile. "Hi, I'm here to pick up some documents left under the name Matthew Ellis. They should be ready for pickup." Before the teller could respond, a sharp voice interrupted from across the room. "Excuse me," it said, dripping with authority. Matthew turned to see a woman striding toward him. Her nameplate read Victoria Lane, branch manager. She was impeccably dressed, her tailored suit and sleek heels exuding professionalism. But there was an edge to her demeanor, a rigidness that spoke of someone used to being in control. Victoria stopped in front of Matthew, her eyes quickly scanning him from head to toe. Her gaze lingered on his hoodie and scuffed sneakers before she crossed her arms. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone making it clear that his presence was, at best, unexpected. Matthew tilted his head slightly, surprised but not unsettled by her tone. "Thank you, but I've already spoken to the teller. I'm just here to collect some documents." Victoria's expression hardened. "We don't typically hold documents for walk-in customers," she said pointedly. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The room grew quieter. A few customers turned their heads, sensing the tension. The teller, who had been about to check the system, hesitated and glanced nervously at Victoria. Matthew, unfazed, replied calmly, "Yes, I'm sure. This is the branch I've always used. If you could just check, the documents should be there." Victoria's lips curled into a tight smile. "And do you have an account with us, Mr. Ellis?" she asked, emphasizing his name as if testing its legitimacy. Matthew met her gaze steadily. "I do," he said simply. Victoria let out a small dismissive laugh. "Well, I'm not sure how we'd have your documents without confirming your account status. This branch primarily serves our premium clientele, and we have strict policies in place. Maybe you should try one of our standard branches." Matthew's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained composed. He had faced situations like this before, times when people made assumptions based on his appearance. But this was different. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a place he had built, albeit indirectly. "I understand your concern for security," Matthew said evenly, "but I'm confident my documents are here. Perhaps we could check the system." Victoria hesitated, then turned to the teller. "Fine," she said curtly. "Check his name. But I doubt we have anything on file for him." The teller, flustered, began typing into her computer. The silence in the room was palpable. Matthew stood quietly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Victoria's rigid posture. As the seconds ticked by, Victoria took a step closer to Matthew and lowered her voice. "Look," she said in a tone that was meant to be discreet, but came off as patronizing. "I don't mean to be rude, but this branch caters to a certain level of clientele. If you're not in that bracket, there's really nothing we can do for you." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "A certain level of clientele," he repeated, his voice steady. Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder at the teller, who was now staring at her screen, her expression a mix of confusion and surprise. Miss Lane, the teller said hesitantly. Victoria turned sharply. What is it? She snapped. The teller looked up, her cheeks flushed. His documents are here, she said quietly. They're marked for secure pickup. For a moment, Victoria froze. The confidence in her posture faltered as the weight of the teller's words sunk in. What? She said, her voice a mix of disbelief and irritation. The teller nodded and held up a sealed envelope with Matthew's name clearly printed on it. They were flagged for priority handling. Victoria's face turned a shade redder as she snatched the envelope from the teller and handed it to Matthew, avoiding his gaze. Here, she said stiffly. Next time, please ensure you notify us in advance. Matthew took the envelope, his polite smile never wavering. Thank you, he said. Then, after a pause, he added, out of curiosity, Miss Lane, how do you define a certain level of clientele? Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes locking with his. For a brief moment, she seemed at a loss for words. Matthew let the question hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Because it seems to me that your definition has less to do with policies and more to do with assumptions. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but Matthew raised a hand. No need to answer now, he said, but I think it's worth reflecting on. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit, his steps unhurried. The room remained silent, the weight of the encounter hanging heavy in the air. As he reached the door, Matthew paused and looked back, catching Victoria's eye one last time. Respect, he said, his voice calm but firm. It's a policy that works for everyone. And with that, he stepped out into the gray Seattle afternoon, leaving the branch in a stunned silence. The unveiling. The door of the bank swung shut behind Matthew Ellis, the cold Seattle air wrapping around him like a reminder of the world outside. He adjusted his hoodie, his mind replaying the encounter. Moments like these were never new to him, but they never failed to sting. However, he wasn't a man who let such incidents pass without leaving a mark. He walked toward his car, a sleek electric sedan parked inconspicuously at the curb. Leaning against it, he opened the envelope he retrieved, checking its contents. Everything was in order, but the interaction with the branch manager still lingered in his thoughts. Matthew had long ago learned to pick his battles, and this one, he knew, wasn't over yet. Inside the bank, the tension from the exchange was far from dissipated. The young teller, Lisa, still sat at her desk, visibly shaken. She had felt the weight of every word during the confrontation and couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Her role had been small, but it was clear that something larger was at play. Victoria Lane, meanwhile, had retreated to her office, closing the door behind her with more force than necessary. She slumped into her chair, her hands trembling slightly. Her mind raced, replaying the scene that had unfolded minutes earlier. Who was that man? Why had his calm, measured tone unsettled her so deeply? And more importantly, why had his name sounded so familiar? Determined to regain her composure, Victoria pulled out her laptop. She typed Matthew Ellis into the search bar, not expecting much. But as the results loaded, her stomach dropped. The first link was an article titled, Matthew Ellis, the visionary behind the Emerald Horizon Bank Network. The second link, a glowing profile on a business magazine site, detailed his rise from a struggling entrepreneur to a multimillionaire who had revolutionized community banking. Article after article painted the picture of a man who wasn't just successful, but also deeply committed to social equality and economic fairness. Victoria's eyes widened as she scrolled further. Emerald Horizon Bank, the very institution she managed a branch for, was not just a project of his but his brainchild. He had founded it 10 years ago with the goal of creating a banking system that treated everyone, regardless of appearance or status, with dignity and respect. Her heart sank. She had humiliated the very man who owned the bank she worked for. Outside, Matthew finished reading through his documents and slid them back into the envelope. He checked his watch. He had a meeting across town in 2 hours. There was still time to address what had just happened, but he didn't want to act out of anger. Change, he believed, came not from confrontation, but from understanding and accountability. Sliding back into the driver's seat, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. After 2 rings, a warm voice answered. "Mr. Ellis, how can I help you?" It was Mark Tran, the regional manager overseeing several branches of Emerald Horizon Bank. "Mark," Matthew said, his tone even. "I just had an interesting experience at the downtown branch. I think it's worth discussing." There was a pause. "Interesting, sir." Matthew chuckled lightly. "Let's call it a learning opportunity for now. Can you meet me at the branch in 30 minutes? Mark, ever efficient, didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'll head there right away." Back at the branch, the staff could sense something was amiss. Victoria's door remained closed, and the other tellers exchanged nervous glances. Lisa, still feeling uneasy, decided to look up Matthew Ellis herself. What she found left her both astonished and inspired. She couldn't believe she had been part of an incident involving the man who had created the very institution she worked for, a man whose vision she admired even before knowing his name. When the door to Victoria's office finally opened, she stepped out, her expression carefully composed, though the color in her cheeks betrayed her lingering embarrassment. Before she could say anything, the main door of the branch opened, and Mark Tran walked in. The staff straightened in unison. Mark was a well-respected figure, known for his fairness and professionalism, but his unexpected arrival put everyone on edge. Victoria approached him quickly. "Mr. Tran," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What a surprise. Is everything all right?" Mark smiled politely, but his eyes were sharp. "I think we need to have a discussion, Victoria. In fact, Mr. Ellis will be joining us shortly." Victoria froze, the weight of his words sinking in. "Mr. Ellis is coming back here?" "Yes," Mark said. "I understand there was an incident earlier. He'd like to address it." Victoria's mind raced. She had hoped the interaction would be a passing moment, one she could learn from quietly. But the fact that Matthew Ellis himself was returning meant this was far more serious than she had anticipated. Matthew arrived a few minutes later, his demeanor as calm as ever. He walked into the branch, greeted Mark with a handshake, and nodded politely at Victoria. "Shall we talk?" he asked. Victoria swallowed hard and led the way to her office, where Mark and Matthew followed. Once inside, the tension was thick, but Matthew's calm presence somehow diffused it. "Miss Lane," he began, settling into a chair across from her desk, "I wanted to take a moment to address what happened earlier." Victoria nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mr. Ellis, I'd like to start by apologizing. I didn't recognize you, and I spoke out of turn. It won't happen again." Matthew studied her for a moment before speaking. "I appreciate your apology, but this isn't just about me. It's about the assumptions we make and the way we treat people based on those assumptions. I wasn't dressed in a suit or carrying a briefcase, so you decided I didn't belong here. That's not the culture I want for Emerald Horizon Bank." Victoria's face reddened. "You're absolutely right," she said. "I made a mistake, and I regret it deeply." Mark, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "Victoria, this is an opportunity to learn. Matthew didn't build this bank to serve just the wealthy or well-dressed. He built it to serve everyone with dignity and respect. That has to start at every level, especially here at the branches." Victoria nodded earnestly. "I understand. I'll do everything I can to ensure this doesn't happen again." Matthew leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. "I believe in second chances, Miss Lane. But change has to be more than words. I'll be keeping an eye on this branch to ensure that our values are reflected in every interaction." Victoria looked down, humbled but grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I won't let you down." As Matthew and Mark left the office, the staff watched them go, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Matthew paused near the counter where Lisa stood, still looking nervous. "Thank you for finding those documents earlier," he said to her with a warm smile. "Your professionalism didn't go unnoticed." Lisa's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis. It means a lot." As Matthew walked out of the branch, the cold air greeted him once again. He felt a sense of satisfaction, not because he had asserted his authority, but because he had sown the seeds for change. For him, this wasn't just about one branch or one person. It was about ensuring that every person who walked into one of his banks felt valued, no matter who they were or what they looked like. He got into his car, ready for his next meeting, knowing that the ripples of this moment would spread far beyond that small branch in downtown Seattle. Seeds of change. The encounter at the downtown branch lingered in Matthew Ellis's mind as he drove through the bustling streets of Seattle. Despite the satisfaction of addressing the situation head-on, he knew that real change wasn't achieved in a single conversation. He also understood that his actions that day had sent a ripple through the bank, not just in that branch but across the organization. Now it was time to see where that ripple would lead. At the downtown branch, the air was still thick with the aftermath of Matthew's visit. The staff moved through their tasks with an unusual quietness, their minds replaying the events of the day. None felt the weight of the moment more than Victoria Lane. She had returned to her office after Matthew and Mark left, staring blankly at her computer screen, her thoughts racing. Victoria wasn't a bad manager. She had risen through the ranks with a reputation for being efficient and detail-oriented. But efficiency had come at a cost. Her focus on procedure and appearance had hardened her, making her blind to the nuances of human interaction. What Matthew had said about respect resonated deeply, unearthing a truth she had ignored for years. Her instincts told her this was a turning point, and she had to act before it slipped away. After a few moments of reflection, Victoria picked up her phone and made a call. "Lisa," she said when the young teller answered, "can you come to my office? I'd like to talk." Lisa hesitated before knocking on Victoria's door. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she couldn't shake the tension she'd felt since Matthew Ellis had left the branch. When Victoria invited her in, Lisa was surprised to see a more subdued version of the typically commanding manager. Gone was the sharpness in her tone. Instead, she seemed almost apologetic. "Please, sit," Victoria said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Lisa sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I wanted to thank you," Victoria began, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "for handling Mr. Ellis's request professionally earlier today." Lisa blinked, caught off guard. I was doing my job," she said hesitantly. Victoria nodded. "Exactly. You did your job, and you did it well. Better than I did, frankly." Lisa's eyes widened. She hadn't expected such an admission. Victoria sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Today was a wake-up call for me. Mr. Ellis wasn't just pointing out my behavior. He was highlighting a culture that I've allowed to grow here. A culture that prioritizes appearances over substance, assumptions over respect. That has to change." Lisa nodded slowly. "It wasn't just you," she said cautiously. "I think we've all gotten used to certain ways of thinking." Victoria smiled faintly, appreciating Lisa's tact. "Maybe so, but the responsibility falls on leadership. If this branch is going to embody the values Mr. Ellis built this bank on, it starts with me." Lisa nodded again, her confidence growing. "What can I do to help?" Victoria leaned forward, her expression serious but hopeful. "For starters, I want your honest input. You're on the front lines, interacting with our customers every day. What do you see that needs to change?" Lisa hesitated, unsure if she should be so candid. But something about Victoria's tone convinced her that this was genuine. "Well," she began, "I think we sometimes focus too much on the way people look or what we assume about them. Some customers feel intimidated coming here, especially if they don't look like they fit the image of our usual clientele." Victoria winced at the truth of Lisa's words but nodded. "I see your point. And what about our team? Do you feel empowered to act in those situations? Lisa hesitated again, but decided to be honest. Not always. Sometimes it feels like we're expected to defer to rules without thinking about the person in front of us. It's hard to know when to push back or when to follow protocol. Victoria absorbed Lisa's words, recognizing how much work lay ahead. But for the first time, she felt a sense of purpose beyond her usual metrics and procedures. "Thank you, Lisa," she said. "Your perspective is invaluable. I want you to know that going forward, I'm committed to creating a culture where every customer and employee feels valued." Lisa smiled, a flicker of hope lighting her expression. "Thank you, Miss Lane. I think we all want that." Meanwhile, Matthew sat in the lobby of the Emerald Horizon headquarters, waiting for his meeting with the board of directors. The downtown branch had been just one of many stops in his week, but the experience had reignited his determination to ensure the bank's core values were upheld across every location. When the board members filed into the room, they greeted him warmly, but Matthew's demeanor was serious. After the formalities were exchanged, he stood at the head of the table, his gaze steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to talk about culture, not policies, not profits, but the culture we've built and the one we want to sustain." The board members exchanged curious glances, but gave him their full attention. "I founded Emerald Horizon with a simple vision," Matthew continued, "to create a banking system that treated every person with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or appearance. That vision has brought us success, but it's also at risk of being overshadowed by complacency." He recounted his experience at the downtown branch, carefully avoiding naming individuals but detailing the assumptions and judgments he had faced. The board listened intently, some nodding in agreement while others frowned, troubled by what they were hearing. "This isn't just about one branch," Matthew said. "It's about the values we claim to uphold. If even one customer walks into one of our branches and feels dismissed or disrespected, then we've failed, not just them, but ourselves." One of the board members, an older woman named Sylvia Patel, spoke up. "You're right, Matthew. We've grown rapidly, and in that growth, we may have lost sight of what makes us unique. What do you propose we do to address this?" Matthew smiled faintly, glad for her directness. "It starts with accountability at every level. Managers need training that goes beyond procedure. They need to understand the importance of empathy and human connection. Employees should feel empowered to act with integrity, even if it means bending a rule to do what's right. And we, as leaders, need to set the example." Sylvia nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like we need to revisit our training programs and reinforce our mission statement." "Exactly," Matthew said. "But more than that, we need to create a system of checks and balances, ways to ensure that our values are being practiced, not just preached." The board murmured in agreement, and as the discussion continued, Matthew felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the beginning of a larger transformation, one that would ensure Emerald Horizon stayed true to its roots while evolving to meet the needs of its customers and employees. Back at the downtown branch, Victoria gathered her staff for an impromptu meeting. She stood at the front of the room, her usual air of authority softened by a new sense of vulnerability. "Today was a lesson for me," she began, looking each of her team members in the eye. "One that I think we can all learn from. Our job isn't just to follow rules or meet quotas. It's to serve our community with respect and empathy. That starts now." The team listened intently, their initial apprehension giving way to a shared sense of possibility. For the first time, they felt like they were part of something bigger, something meaningful. And as Victoria outlined her vision for change, the seeds Matthew had planted began to take root, promising a future where respect and dignity were more than just ideals. They were the foundation of everything they did. The ripple effect. The downtown branch of Emerald Horizon Bank was quiet the next morning, its usual hum subdued as the staff adjusted to a new atmosphere. Though no official announcement had been made, the tension from the previous day's encounter with Matthew Ellis lingered in the air, weaving its way through every interaction and task. Victoria Lane, the branch manager, stood in her office reviewing her notes from the team meeting she'd held the day before. Her resolve to change the culture of the branch was firm, but she also felt the weight of the challenge ahead. Change was rarely easy, and she knew that her team would need more than words to believe in her commitment. A chance encounter. At mid-morning, the bell over the entrance chimed, and an older man walked in, his weathered coat and scuffed boots betraying a life of hard work. His name was Harold Jenkins, a retired construction worker who had been banking at Emerald Horizon for years. Harold had always felt out of place in the sleek environment of the downtown branch, but it was the closest location to his apartment. Lisa, the young teller, greeted Harold with a warm smile. She had always treated every customer with kindness, but after her conversation with Victoria the day before, she felt an added responsibility to ensure every interaction reflected the values Matthew Ellis had emphasized. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," Lisa said. "How can I help you today?" Harold hesitated, shifting his weight awkwardly. I need to talk about a loan payment. I think there's been a mistake. The statement I got says I'm late, but I've been paying every month." Lisa nodded reassuringly. "Let me take a look for you. Do you have your account number or ID with you?" As Harold fumbled with his wallet, Victoria stepped out of her office. She noticed Harold at the counter, and for the first time, took a moment to truly observe him. In the past, she might have dismissed him as just another routine customer, but today, she saw him through a different lens. She noticed the nervous way he stood, the uncertainty in his voice, and the way he clutched his old leather wallet, as if it were his lifeline. Steeling herself, Victoria approached the counter. "Good morning, sir," she said, her tone soft but genuine. "I'm Victoria Lane, the branch manager. Is there something I can help with?" Harold looked up, startled. He glanced at Lisa, unsure if he was in trouble. I think there's a mistake on my loan," he mumbled. Victoria smiled gently. "Let's take a look together. Lisa, would you pull up Mr. Jenkins' account? I'd like to review it personally." Lisa nodded and quickly brought up the account on her screen. Victoria leaned over, scanning the details. As she reviewed the records, she noticed that Harold had indeed been making his payments on time. The issue was a clerical error. A payment had been misapplied to the wrong account. "Mr. Jenkins," Victoria said, looking up, "you're absolutely right. This was a mistake on our end, and I'm so sorry for any stress it caused you. I'll have this corrected immediately." Harold blinked in surprise. "You mean I'm not late?" "Not at all," Victoria said firmly. "And I'll make sure this doesn't affect your credit or any future statements." Harold's shoulders relaxed, and a faint smile appeared on his face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I was worried I'd done something wrong." Victoria shook her head. "Not at all. If anything, we owe you an apology. And please, if you ever have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to ask for me directly." Harold nodded, visibly relieved. As he left the branch, he turned back briefly and gave Victoria and Lisa a small wave. For the first time in years, he felt like more than just another customer. A new approach. The interaction with Harold stayed with Victoria throughout the day. It was a simple moment, but it highlighted how much impact even small gestures of respect and empathy could have. Inspired, she called another team meeting that afternoon. The staff gathered in the break room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. Victoria stood at the front, her posture more open than they were used to seeing. "I want to thank you all for the work you've been doing," she began. "I know the past couple of days have been different, and I appreciate your patience. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what it means to lead this branch, and I realized something important." She paused, looking around the room. "We've been so focused on following rules and hitting targets that we've lost sight of why we're here in the first place. This bank exists because of the people we serve. It's not just about policies. It's about treating every person who walks through those doors with dignity and respect." The team exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. To that end, Victoria continued, "We're going to make some changes. First, I want us to start looking at our customers not as account numbers but as individuals. If someone needs help, we'll take the time to understand their situation and find a solution. Second, I'm introducing an open-door policy for all of you. If you ever feel unsure about how to handle a situation, come to me and we'll figure it out together." Lisa raised her hand tentatively. "Miss Lane, does this mean we can go beyond the usual protocols if it helps a customer?" Victoria smiled. "Within reason, yes. Sometimes doing the right thing means bending the rules a little. And if anyone questions you, they can come to me." The room was silent for a moment before a slow wave of nods and murmured agreement rippled through the team. For the first time, they felt a sense of empowerment and purpose beyond their daily routines. The ripple expands. That evening, Lisa stayed late, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few days. She thought about Matthew Ellis's visit, Victoria's shift in attitude, and the small but meaningful change she had witnessed with Harold Jenkins. For the first time in her career, Lisa felt like she was part of something bigger, a movement toward genuine connection and respect. Before leaving, she wrote a quick email to Matthew Ellis, whose contact information she'd found in the employee directory. She hesitated for a moment, then hit send. Subject: "Thank you. Dear Mr. Ellis, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for visiting our branch yesterday. Your words had a profound impact on our team, and I've already seen changes in how we approach our work. Miss Lane has been making a real effort to lead with empathy, and it's inspiring to see. I just wanted you to know that what you said didn't fall on deaf ears. We're listening, and we're learning. Best regards, Lisa Ramirez." When Matthew read the email later that night, a small smile crossed his face. The ripple was spreading, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope, not just for the bank he'd built, but for the people who were shaping its future. The quiet transformation. The next morning, Matthew Ellis sat at his kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee. The soft light of dawn filtered through the windows, casting a serene glow over the room. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, smiling as he saw Lisa's email again. Her message wasn't just a note of thanks. It was evidence that change, no matter how small, could take root. But Matthew knew that a single email wasn't the end of the story. Transformation required consistency and patience. He decided it was time to check in discreetly to see how the downtown branch was adjusting. He had no intention of announcing himself again. This time, he wanted to observe from the sidelines. A new day of the branch. By mid-morning, the downtown branch of Emerald Horizon Bank was bustling. Customers lined up at the counters, and the tellers worked efficiently, but with a noticeable shift in their demeanor. They smiled more, made eye contact, and spoke with genuine warmth. It was subtle, but it was there. Victoria Lane stood near the entrance, greeting customers as they walked in. Her presence, once intimidating, now felt approachable. She had spent the past 2 days reflecting deeply on her role as a leader and had resolved to lead by example. Her staff noticed the change, and while some were skeptical at first, they couldn't deny the sincerity in her actions. One such customer was Angela Carter, a single mother who had recently opened an account at the branch. She approached Victoria hesitantly, holding a folder of documents. "Excuse me," Angela said softly. "I'm here about a loan application. I'm not sure I filled everything out correctly." Victoria turned to her with a warm smile. "Of course, let's take a look together," she said. "Would you like to sit down? We'll go through it step by step." Angela's face lit up with relief. "Thank you. That would be wonderful." Victoria led Angela to a small desk near the back of the branch. As they reviewed the application, Victoria took her time explaining each section, ensuring Angela understood everything. It was a small gesture, but for Angela, it made all the difference. By the time they finished, she felt confident and reassured, a stark contrast to how she'd felt walking in. A familiar face, Matthew entered the branch quietly, wearing a black jacket and jeans. He kept to the side, observing the flow of customers and employees. He recognized Lisa at her station, assisting a young couple with a savings account. Her tone was friendly and patient, her smile genuine. As he watched, he noticed Victoria across the room, speaking with Angela. He noted the ease with which she interacted, her body language open and inviting. It was a stark contrast to the sharp, dismissive demeanor she had exhibited days earlier. Satisfied but curious, Matthew approached the counter where Lisa stood. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm. Lisa looked up and blinked in surprise, immediately recognizing him. "Mr. Ellis," she exclaimed, her voice low enough not to draw attention. "I didn't expect to see you here." Matthew smiled. "Just observing," he said. "I wanted to see how things were going." Lisa glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "It's been different," she admitted. "Miss Lane has been incredible. She's really trying to change the way we operate." Matthew nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And you? How do you feel about it?" Lisa hesitated, then smiled. "I feel empowered. For the first time, I feel like what I do here matters, not just to the bank, but to the people who come through those doors." Matthew's smile widened. "That's what it's all about." Lisa straightened. "Would you like me to let Miss Lane know you're here?" Matthew shook his head. "No need. I just wanted to see the change for myself." "Keep up the good work, Lisa." She nodded, her smile bright. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis." The ripple reaches further. As the day progressed, Victoria continued her rounds, pausing occasionally to check in with her staff. Each interaction was purposeful, designed to build trust and reinforce the shift in culture she was striving for. By early afternoon, Mark Tran, the regional manager, arrived at the branch for an unannounced visit. He had heard about the changes Victoria was implementing and wanted to see them in action. Victoria greeted Mark with a mix of surprise and pride. "Mr. Tran," she said warmly, "it's good to see you." Mark smiled. "Likewise, I've heard about the adjustments you've made here, and I wanted to see how things were going." Victoria nodded. "I'd be happy to show you around." As they toured the branch, Mark observed the interactions between the staff and customers. He noticed the warmth in Lisa's tone, the attentiveness of the other tellers, and the ease with which customers approached Victoria. It was clear that something had shifted. When they returned to Victoria's office, Mark leaned back in his chair, visibly impressed. "You've made remarkable progress," he said. "But more importantly, it feels authentic. The staff isn't just following orders. They're embracing the change." Victoria exhaled, relief washing over her. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I knew it was necessary. Mr. Ellis's visit was a wake-up call, and I'm determined to ensure we never lose sight of our purpose again." Mark nodded, his expression serious. "Change starts at the top, Victoria. You've set a strong example, and it's clear the team is following your lead. I'll be sharing your progress with Mr. Ellis." Victoria smiled, a sense of pride blooming within her. "Thank you, Mr. Tran. I won't let you, or him, down." The quiet hero. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Matthew sat in his office, reviewing reports from various branches. He paused when Mark's email came through, detailing the transformation at the downtown branch. Attached was a photo Mark had taken of the team, smiling together during a break. Matthew leaned back in his chair, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. The change he had witnessed wasn't just a victory for the downtown branch. It was a testament to the power of accountability, empathy, and leadership. It was proof that even the smallest seeds of change could grow into something remarkable. As he closed his laptop, Matthew's thoughts turned to the future. There was still work to be done, more branches to visit, more leaders to inspire. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of gratitude. The ripple had begun, and he was ready to see how far it would reach. A legacy of change. A week after his visit to the downtown branch, Matthew Ellis sat in a sleek conference room at Emerald Horizon's headquarters. The board of directors gathered around the large oval table, the air charged with curiosity and anticipation. Matthew had called this meeting to outline the next phase of his vision for the bank, and everyone in attendance understood its importance. At the center of the table was a projector displaying a simple slide: the culture of dignity, a vision for the future. Matthew stood at the head of the room, his demeanor calm but resolute. He began, his voice measured and clear. Over the past decade, Emerald Horizon has grown from a single location to a network of branches serving thousands. This growth is a testament to our shared vision: to create a banking system that values people over profit, empathy over efficiency, and dignity over assumptions. The board members nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Sylvia Patel, one of the most respected voices on the board, spoke up. "Your vision has brought us success, Matthew. But I sense there's more you want to address." Matthew smiled faintly. "You're right, Sylvia. Growth has brought challenges. As we expand, there's a risk of losing the very values that set us apart. I experienced this firsthand at the downtown branch last week." The room fell silent as Matthew recounted the encounter with Victoria Lane. He didn't name her directly, choosing instead to focus on the broader implications of the incident. "What I saw wasn't malice or incompetence," he explained. "It was a symptom of a culture that prioritizes protocol over people. And that's on us. On me." Several board members exchanged uneasy glances, but Sylvia leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "How do you propose we address this?" Matthew clicked to the next slide, which displayed the words, "Empathy training and cultural reset." "We start by investing in our people," he said. "Every employee, from tellers to executives, will undergo empathy training. This isn't about compliance. It's about understanding the human element in every interaction. We'll also create a feedback system that allows employees and customers to share their experiences anonymously. This will help us identify gaps and opportunities for improvement." A younger board member, David Lynn, raised a hand. "What about branch managers? They're the ones who set the tone for their teams." Matthew nodded. "That's a critical piece. Branch managers will receive leadership training focused on emotional intelligence and inclusivity. They'll also be held accountable for fostering a culture that aligns with our core values. We'll monitor their progress through regular evaluations, including feedback from their teams." Sylvia smiled, impressed. "It's ambitious, but it's exactly what we need. A new beginning for the downtown branch." While Matthew was outlining his vision at headquarters, the downtown branch was experiencing a quiet revolution. Victoria Lane had taken her commitment to heart, implementing small but impactful changes. She began holding daily morning meetings where staff could share ideas and concerns. She also started a customer feedback initiative, encouraging patrons to share their experiences openly. One such patron was Harold Jenkins, the retired construction worker who had returned to the branch after his loan issue was resolved. This time, he wasn't there to fix a problem. He was there to open a savings account for his grandson. Victoria greeted him personally, her warm demeanor putting him at ease. As they completed the paperwork, Harold smiled. "This place feels different," he said, "like it's more welcoming." Victoria felt a swell of pride, but kept her response humble. "That's what we're aiming for, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you for noticing." Harold nodded, his face thoughtful. "You're doing a good thing here. Keep it up." The ripple expands. As weeks turned into months, the changes at the downtown branch began to ripple outward. Employees who once felt stifled by rigid procedures found new energy in their work. Customers noticed the shift too, with many commenting on the improved atmosphere. Lisa, the young teller, became a rising star within the bank. Her natural empathy and dedication to the bank's mission didn't go unnoticed. Victoria began mentoring her, grooming her for a leadership role. "You have what it takes to go far, Lisa," Victoria told her during one of their one-on-one meetings. "Never doubt that." Meanwhile, Victoria herself became a model for other branch managers. Her transformation and the positive impact it had on her branch caught the attention of regional leadership. She was invited to lead workshops for other managers, sharing the lessons she had learned. The Grand Initiative. 6 months after Matthew's visit to the downtown branch, Emerald Horizon launched its Culture of Dignity initiative. The rollout included workshops, updated training materials, and a video message from Matthew Ellis himself, emphasizing the importance of empathy and respect in every interaction. The initiative was met with enthusiasm across the organization. Employees appreciated the focus on people over policies, and customers noticed the difference in how they were treated. Even skeptical executives came to see the value of the initiative as customer satisfaction scores soared. A legacy secured. On a sunny Friday afternoon, Matthew returned to the downtown branch unannounced. This time, he wasn't there to observe or critique. He simply wanted to thank the team for their efforts. When he walked in, he was greeted by Victoria, who smiled warmly. "Mr. Ellis," she said, her tone filled with genuine respect. "It's good to see you." Matthew returned her smile. "The feeling is mutual. I've been hearing great things about this branch." Victoria gestured toward her team, who were busy assisting customers. "It's a group effort. We're all committed to making this place the best it can be." Matthew nodded. "That's all I've ever wanted. Keep up the good work." As he left the branch, Matthew felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road to transformation had been long and challenging, but the results were undeniable. Emerald Horizon was more than a bank. It was a beacon of hope, a place where everyone, regardless of their background or appearance, could feel valued. For Matthew, it wasn't just about the success of his vision. It was about the legacy he was building, a legacy rooted in empathy, respect, and the quiet, powerful ripple of change.